ready. All right. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. At this point, I will call to order the meeting of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee on Thursday, August 17th, 2023 at 7 p.m. I'll begin by asking everyone to, inviting everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
One out there, sorry.
Slippery.
Is that wax? New wax?
Yeah, they just waxed it. Test.
Okay. All right, hold on one second. I'm getting my, all right, next up, I'm going to present the land acknowledgement. The Hamilton Wenham Regional School District would like to acknowledge the Massachusetts tribe, the tribe of indigenous peoples from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We would like to pay our respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit historical Massachusetts tribe territories to this day. Okay, Mr. Tracy, it looks like you've got the Zoom link
We are up and running, yes.
and running. At this point, do we have any citizens who are looking to make public comments?
None in the room.
Okay, and seeing none here, I think we can move forward. Go ahead and close that.
Closing the link.
Okay. Next up, normally I ask somebody, but I didn't do that. Amy is volunteering to read a review of one of our school committee protocols. Thank you.
Sure. As elected members of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee, we, including the superintendent, accept the high honor and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that the students of the district receive the best education possible. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. Number 7, administration will endeavor to make materials for school committee meetings available the Friday before the meeting. The school committee will recognize that some circumstances will not always make this possible. In any event, we recognize that having background materials available for school committee members is a best practice.
Thank you. Next up is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items that they'd like to hold from the consent agenda? Francesca?
I want to hold the booster advertising banner memo.
The booster advertising banners? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Thing I couldn't really understand.
Yep,
Yes.
okay. All right.
Which
But
number
the
is that?
banners, not the book, correct?
No, not the book.
The banners, okay.
Yes.
All right, I actually want to hold the booster-funded assistant coaches. Anything else? Okay, we're ready for,
Oh, okay. So I'm just opening the exhibit right now.
Sure.
So there was just a sentence.
oh, no, can I ask you to make a motion for the rest of the consent agenda first?
Oh, yeah, right.
No worries,
Sorry.
it's been a break, there's been a break here, so.
Yeah, right. I gotta get used to. So I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approves the consent agenda as written, with the exception of the booster advertising banner memo and
Which number is that with the?
C, and it has a bullet. I mean, there's
3?
not really.
Yeah, it's under,
a number.
yeah, C.
Under C,
Under C.
yeah, but it doesn't have a, it's just a bullet, the last
Okay.
bullet of C. And also the booster funded assistant coaches.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Amy. All right, so there's no discussion. All in favor? And that is unanimous of the 5 members present, and the motion passes. Francesca?
Yes, on the, so the document that's attached here on the banner memo. Hold on, I'm not opening the correct one. Just give me just a second, I want to open it.
It's up on the screen, too, if that helps.
Oh, yeah. I just can't read. Okay, yeah, it's just the last sentence. It says, "The money made from this book." I wonder if that referred to the book? It's just that.
Oh, okay, yeah, it would be for the banners.
Right.
It's for the banners.
Yes, because
Basically,
the point prior to this was on the books.
Yeah.
And so it mentions the books. So I figure maybe there's like a cut and paste error there. Just
The,
a very,
the boosters will get both of those.
Okay.
They collect, basically, they collect the money, and then they'll make donations to offset
okay,
costs for members of the football team.
okay. Yeah,
or
yeah,
coaches
that
or
makes sense.
Yep, or
It's just like a
scholarships.
little like type, a typo
Yep,
there.
a
That's
little
it.
typo in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, and I think you're probably right, that's probably a cut and paste error from the.
Right.
Okay, do you want to give it a shot to make a motion?
So, yeah, so I just moved to approve the point C, bullet 4 of the consent agenda on the banner memo.
Second.
Second by Amy. Is there any further discussion? Nope. All those in favor? And that is unanimous of the 5 members present. And thank you for bringing it up, Francesca. It's important to make sure there's not something that.
Typo,
yeah.
nothing big deal.
I wanted to look at the booster-funded assistant coaches. My question is for you, Eric, is that I feel like usually there's a dollar figure associated with this, and I'm not sure if, I just have a question about that.
So, what we ran into last year was there was a dollar figure attached, and the coach was on a different scale. So it really depends on who the coach is, how long they've been with us. So it's variable based on the contract, the teacher's contract. So, for instance, if we put $1,000 in there, and the position was $3,000, and they're paying for half of it, they're really donating $1,500. So we left it vague so that we could be able to put people in the right place.
Yeah, and I actually remember that. And my question was sort of like when we accept a donation, I guess I'm just wondering, like, it seems fine, but it's also sort of open-ended, so I don't know if there's a,
Yeah, but I
like,
think
do we
it's
need?
okay to have it open-ended because the contract's listed in the
Right, there's
the
a-
salary's listed in the contract, and depending on the hiring,
Right.
we're saying it's okay for you to hire half of it.
Within that, within
Yeah,
a range,
within the
right? In other
contract
words, it's not going to be an infinite amount of money
Right.
because,
Right. Yeah, it's limited to whatever's in the negotiated
Yep.
contract.
it's true. Is there other discussion?
No, but that's an interesting point.
Okay.
Okay.
Did we have a motion? No.
No, we
I
didn't
move to,
vote on that.
okay, so I move to approve also the last point of the consent agenda, point C, regarding the booster-funded assistant coaches.
Second.
Second by Amy. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is unanimous of the 5 members present. Okay. All right, next up, take it away, Eric. We're going to talk about district goals.
Make sure everybody can see this. So we've been working on this since really last April. As we overlap our school years, we're closing out our 22-23 goals and fine-tuning and building our 23-24 goals. We brought it to the committee at the end of last year with some very drafty, lofty, like here are 6 or 7 different goals we're thinking about, what makes sense. So we had some conversation during that meeting. During the summer, there were 2 opportunities for re-review. School committee workshop that was on August 5th. We went through them, identified some points that we wanted to have included and considered, and then we also went the following week during the leadership team retreat, went back to work with the goals and added the deliverables. One of the things we did this year, because there was a little bit of confusion last year, we had deliverables and kind of how you're going to get there. And people were confused by how much information was there. So we just decided, all right, let's go with deliverables. Those are things that we can write about when we get to the year end. These are the things that basically will outline our end-of-the-year plan. So for example, this first one, completing the district communications plan by the end of January 2023, creating the plan, putting together the committee, getting the feedback, and then building the final plan and presenting it to the committee is really as simple as that. Some of the same processes we've done. Feedback from the constituents is definitely going to include not only our parents, but we want to get some feedback from local politicians, government agencies, some of the people in the community that don't or may not have children in the school district, so that we can get a kind of a wider breadth. We're really trying to figure out how to develop a plan that not only improves our communications and strengthens our communications within a district, which for us can be fairly easy, but outside of the district, especially with these bigger projects on the horizon, how do we deal with that? How do we develop it? How do we, touch base with the people who may not have children or grandchildren in the district? The second one is no different than the last 2 years, MTSS structures. These are goals that have been extending now for, this will be the third year. Principals were responsible for that, and when you're looking at it from the perspective of levels, we broke it out by level: elementary, middle school, and high school. Usually we do elementary and secondary, but middle school is in a different place than the high school, so we felt like it would be important to break that out so that people could understand it. At the elementary level, we're actually building intervention blocks in our quest to continue to stop pulling kids out of classroom activities for interventions. We're looking at a very specific time built into the schedule where we can do interventions and also support Tier 2 interventions or even Tier 3 interventions if necessary. We are now in the third year. If you go back to when we first started this, we started with literacy. We were going to get our literacy program launched off the ground. But now we're doing the same thing with math this year. We're going to review math across actually K to 8, maybe into the 10th grade, but just for this one, it's going to be K to 5, looking at math programs and doing a very similar process for identifying what makes sense for our kids and our teachers in our classrooms. Then we will implement the math materials and then build in the appropriate interventions. So for example, at the Cutler, we have a math intervention specialist. That person now has a very specific routine based on the assessments and interventions that we'll be doing for our kids. And then really defining roles and responsibility of classroom teachers. So we want to put kids that have been traditionally pulled out of class for interventions back in the classroom. We need to identify for our teachers what that looks like. What does that look like in class? How can you now as a teacher keep all of your kids in your class, but also support the Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions? Tier 3 are much more difficult to do in the classroom, so those generally require a pull-out situation or a specialized situation. And then we're continuing to grow Panorama and use Panorama along with several other data warehouses to be able to track data by subgroups, look at gaps, especially with math, where that's going to be a new focus for us this year. Last year we did a really, really good job putting the literacy program CKLA to work, getting it up and running, and really giving kids a very different and exciting look at classroom. It was very different last year than it was the year before that. And then we're looking at a SEL curriculum for each of the levels. We decided not to go pre-K to 12 because most of the SEL programs that the leadership team initially reviewed do not do a good job pre-K to 12. So we're looking at breaking them out and looking for a specific program for the elementary and then a specific program that meets the needs of secondary. So that's the elementary school. Middle school, we started reading screenings last year with the Dibbles in the 6th grade. Now that will go all the way to 8th grade this year. So we'll have data on kids from K through 8. After the end of this year, we'll have multiple years on any kids that were in the elementary schools in the previous 2 years. So we'll have a number of them. Then the math screeners also at all 3 grade levels. We only used iReady last year at 2. We're moving that into the 3rd grade level, the 8th grade. And then Zach and his new assistant principal, Liana Gerstein, has really looked at the schedule, made some adjustments to the schedule, tightened it up, has utilized the staff differently. There were a number of slots where we could have spread some kids out in the previous schedule. He has taken that on and done a nice job really filling out the schedule a little bit differently than previously used. With again, the intervention focused for a specific block rather than pulling kids out for whatever interventions they may need. Quarterly data meetings, this was new for the middle school. The middle school has always had team meetings, and those team meetings are never specific to the data because we haven't really collected it until last year. So now we have specific data on specific groups of kids that we can isolate, combine, and hand our data teams, and our principals and our assistant principals and the data teams will work through that so that we can have a continuous monitoring system working through the year. ELA will look at a tier 1 curricula. We did exactly at the middle school exactly what I did when I first took over here, looking more deeply at the curriculum and trying to figure out alignments with mass curriculum frameworks and the state standards, and found some holes. So we have looked at piloting English language arts curriculum, similarly to the way we did it with the elementary school. Look at maybe the top 2, pilot them over a short period of time, bring the teachers together, make a decision, and then move forward. And then really looking at executive functioning, what we're finding is at the at the middle school and high school level, executive functioning gets in the way. And those are really organizational skills, how you organize and plan and develop. And that's something that the middle school feels like they want to work on more than they have. It's really, I think it's a good focus to go hand in hand with the integration of the assessments that they have. It gives them another thing to look at. So when a child is having trouble organizationally, how is that impacting it? And then the next step is, all right, what are you going to do about it? You know, okay, we can increase their instruction, but can we help them to understand how their executive functioning skills can be improved along the way? So that's helping teachers to understand what that looks like, getting some agreements at different grade levels so that each grade level has some responsibility for that. And then at the high school, we'll continue to grow what they've been growing. They do support block for 9th grade last year, and they attempted to do it last year at 10th grade, didn't have really enough time. So they have put together a calendar of 9th and 10th grade support block that they will be putting together once school starts. And then they're putting both grades, they're tracking in Panorama. 9th grade was the target last year. We tracked 9th grade data for the entire year, including our after-school program that the committee supported. So that's been helpful to get kids moving in a positive direction. And then the STAR assessment is going to be new for us this year. That is another online assessment program. It happens to be more finely tuned for high school. And we're going to use it for math and ELA. We're going to try it out this year and see. Many of the schools in this area use it and have had success with it. And then trying to continue to grow the after-school academy, increase the participation rate, some types of incentives, things like that. And then we also at the high school level want to look at a tier 1 math curriculum. So one of the questions people will raise or people will wrestle with is, my child takes a math in 6th grade. In 7th grade, my child gets put in this math instead of that math. And then what we've looked at for data is once the child is in one of those 2 tracks, they never leave the track all the way to 12th grade. So we need to come up with not only improved curriculum resources, but also how kids can move between the two tracks that we've built, or how to just not focus on the tracks and more about how kids move through the curriculum. Some of the kids that are in the probably top 10% end up taking 2 maths and 2 sciences their junior and senior year, and that's a heavy load. That is really a heavy load. So we want to look at it for all of our kids and how it impacts all of our kids to see how they may want to travel so that they don't get trapped in a track at the lower grade levels. And then executive functioning is also an issue that they're going to work with in overlap with the middle school. The high school has done a lot of work with inclusive practices That's been kind of their mantra now for 3 full years. Looking at inclusive practice, looking with each other, like classroom walkthroughs, administrators walk through, when I walk through, we look for inclusive practices. So now we're going to start building in executive functioning skills. Last year, we took advantage of an in-house person who has a lot of skills, used to work for Landmark, trained in Landmark, has a really strong background in executive functioning. He did a presentation for our middle and high school staff near the end of last year, and that will carry into this year so that we can continue to examine that and how, again, those executive functioning deficits may be impacting kids in ways that we may not be addressing in the classroom. DEIB, again, I promised this would be here for years to come. It's still here. We are, changing our model a little bit. We want to bring in some professional opportunities for teachers. And last year we did a couple. We need to do more. Doing a couple was okay. We checked a couple boxes. If we were to rate ourselves, in that area as probably a C-. So we want to do a better job with that. Continuing integration of recommendations from the equity audit, which means the leadership team focusing on, again, those recommendations that were made 2 years ago, now, if you can believe it, 18 months ago, and continue to integrate those recommendations. Building a specific DEIB webpage with some timely information, helpful tips, information that we want to push out. And then we're looking at trying to change the structure of how DEIB practices are managed. We initially started out with the recommendation of our person who did the equity audit to say, okay, use an advisory committee and staff it with people from each grade level. We tried that. It's hard to get everybody together because in our schedules, our elementary school people work a later day. They start later and end their day later than our middle and high school people. So the way the contracts work, there's no overlap for them to come together. So you have people coming and going in these committee meetings. So we're going to examine a different structure of how we manage that across the school district. And then really looking at different things for our kids. Sense of belonging is going to be the focus, again. Really trying to work with the identified deficits in the equity audit. And then long-range planning, we have been talking about this for a long time, since I've been in this seat anyway, and the community, the government agencies, the FinComs, and the select boards have been asking for a longer-term plan for capital improvements. So we're looking at developing a very specific capital improvement plan with prioritizing, funding, term lengths, trying to figure out how to fit it into terms along with all the other major size projects that we have going on. For example, the field project is a $15 million project that's on the docket starting in the spring. And then the new school for Cutler, Cutler-Winthrop combo is anywhere from $80 to $100+ million, and those are things coming down the pipe. Meanwhile, we still have other things like a $5 million-ish roof replacement for the high school. And then
did 5 million, did you say?
$5 million to replace the roof, roughly. I mean, that was in 2 years ago's dollars, so it could be very different now. And we are looking at resources to try to figure out how to connect with some grant monies. For instance, some of the government agencies have now put out monies to say we will help in the funding of a roof replacement if you put solar panels on the roof. So it becomes a cost-sharing thing. So those types of things will be built into this program and really help us to look out longitudinally. It'll help the towns to plan longitudinally. They are both in master planning group progress right now, both roughly in the same place. It's getting darker in here. Roughly in the same place. It'll just give us an opportunity to look at some of our capital investments too. So really going back and saying, okay, what are the things we did? So if I said to members of the committee, based on last year, what are the things you approved as capital improvements, anything over, say, $50,000, we did a lot of great things this summer. People may not remember, so we want to be able to also highlight that. So we plan to publish a capital improvement plan We're going to look at 5 to 10, see what's realistic. I don't know how realistic 10 years is out, just given the way things are changing. I mean, interest rates right now are crazy compared to 5 years ago, but could go the other way. We don't know. So looking at some type of planning and modeling. And then really sharing and keeping transparency with our local town officials and government agencies. I think it's important to, again, stay transparent, as we have continued to do, and really just looking forward in the planning phases of, okay, what do we do next? What do we do after that? How do we get there? So, and that is it on the district goals.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for questions. I know in my, I got the opportunity to meet with Eric ahead of this meeting, and I asked a lot of questions then, so I feel like I've gotten a lot of my questions answered. I don't know if other people have questions now. David?
Oh, what were the questions? So we can hear what the answers were.
Oh, sure. No, I'm happy to, yeah, absolutely. So I actually asked a lot of questions about, I think I started our conversation when Eric with saying that I really didn't have any questions about the top line of each one of the goals. I felt like we've discussed these and, so the top line. And so my questions really were in the deliverables. And I think Eric touched on sort of the big picture at the beginning, was that a lot of my questions were very specific, like, some of these deliverables, I wondered whether they were really measurable and how we would be measuring them. And basically what I said, which is kind of what you answered, I think, was that there were answers to each one, that there are deliverables, and that they're kind of a little bit deeper down into the operational.
This is a good example right here. This is one of the questions Dana asked. If you look at the second one, it starts with undergo an elementary math review. Realistically, when she said to me, well, what does undergo mean? Does that mean start it and don't finish it? So we actually are going to change that to complete, begin and complete math review. So some of it was fine tuning like that, and others were questions about what does that look like by the time you get to the end of the year. So a pilot in ELA or a pilot in math, because we haven't gotten as far as saying, here's what we want to pilot. We can't say we're going to pilot 2 or 3. So once we figure out, going through the resources that DESE gives us and some of the research-based stuff, be able to say, okay, we want to look at, just like we did with CKLA. We had GEODS and CKLA. We piloted those 2. They were the top 2 at the time, decided on CKLA, and then move forward with it. So we'll do the same type of a process. It could be more than 2. We might pilot more than 2 at some point. And the math will be different based on, again, the grade levels. There's the continuation of some of the programs doesn't make sense in some cases for taking a program and saying, we're going to use the same program from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So we're looking at it from kind of both ends and squeezing in the middle at the middle school so that we can figure out how to give kids more options and opportunities while also helping them to meet the needs and the requirements of college.
So the deliverable is really possibly a report that says we did this trial, which it ended up choosing this, and the decision is to proceed with this.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine, and that you can touch and feel that.
Yeah, and we'll do the same thing we did last year. At the end of the year, we'll have a full report scaled to these deliverables that'll say, okay, here are the things. So the piece that we took off with the action items, we actually, the leadership team uses these action items to meet the deliverables. So that's their role. Like, okay, how are you meeting these action items? What are you doing? And then how do you now report it out and report some of the changes along the way, or some of the decisions that we make based on a trial or a review, I guess, is the only way I can look at it. So really, we're just trying to take math on now, like the same way we did with literacy. So, and it's a little bit of an unwieldy beast, because we did K to 5, and that was really easy, and going to the middle school last year partially. Now we're going all the way, and then we're going to roll into the high school. So now we have kind of 4 different things going on at the same time. So we're just trying to accelerate that as well.
And I'll just offer you one more example, is under the Miles River Middle School, the bottom one there, it said, implement building-wide research-based practices. And my question to the superintendent was, is that a generic term, research-based practices, or have you identified specific research-based practices already? And he was able to say they do have, they're going to implement practices that they've already identified. And I felt good about, I think maybe in the past, we might have gotten sort of lists of action steps of all the specific practices, and I think that might be too deep in the weeds for us. But I did want to be ensured that that wasn't just sort of a umbrella term, like.
Yeah.
It's important to note, too, we get a lot of support from the state in these areas. So when you look at executive functioning best practices, the state has instructional materials, instructional resources, that will say, okay, here are executive functioning things to look at in classrooms. But the reality is you also need the feedback from the teachers. Like, what are you seeing? You could Google executive function right now and come up with a gigantic list of different things. We may not necessarily be seeing all of those things in our classrooms, but we may be seeing things that are repetitive, that we're seeing from kids over and over and over that we're not addressing.
Well, it's very tied to ADHD. It's not 100% overlap, but ADHD kids have executive function.
Some, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Much higher.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And really looking at that from the teacher level to say, or even our TAs are, what we do at the elementary level, we use them for a lot of our support and a lot of our structural support. So they're in there face down with the kids, really working one-to-one. They can say, here's what I noticed, and then have that conversation with the teachers. And then this process, the action steps would be identifying them, agreeing on them, and then executing on what you're gonna do and how you're gonna do it. So it's a lot more deeper than just what's here.
Right.
To follow up, and a quick question on a point that you were saying, like, how important it is that the teacher kind of recognize certain patterns to be able to intervene on executive functioning, for example. So my question is, I think in the last point, actually in goal 3, you mentioned professional learning opportunities and increasing those. I'm wondering if that could help the teachers identify exactly these kind of patterns,
Right.
and what kind of professional learning opportunities are you thinking about exactly? Like, do you have already kind of thought what those could be, or is that something that the leadership team is thinking about?
So, as you know, we changed the calendar last year from having 2 professional development days in the beginning of school and 2 across the school year. We put them all up front. So not next week, the week after. We have scheduled the 4 days out so that there are specific times and specific opportunities for teachers to sign up for different trainings that will be available. Executive functioning, inclusive practices, some on CKLA, some on math practices. So there are different options across each of the 4 days. If you've ever been to a conference, a big conference, they use SCED. I don't know if you've heard of it. SCED is an online scheduler. We built our schedule in SCED. Jen Clifford has built the entire thing out in SCED with assigned locations and classes. Teachers can go in and choose what they're going to do, and they can do it on their phone or their computer, and it builds out their schedule across the 4 days. So we give them options and time locations. So for example, Monday morning, they're all with me. They don't have it, that's their option. Right after that, though, they have an option to go to training for a 90-minute block. And here are the 8 trainings we're going to offer. Some of them are required, some of them are required by the state that we have to do, and others will be things that we're doing in our implementation. We also take advantage of Wednesdays after school, so we did a lot last year with inclusive practices at the high school, middle school, and the after-school sessions on Wednesdays. We'll continue to do that as well. There's a lot of opportunities.
Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple things. One thing going through this all, it seems like we're adding a lot of outside assessments for data tracking. Excuse me. And, I worry while, we're constantly searching for better ways to sort of assess our kids and be able to figure out tracking their growth, that I want to make sure that we're sort of not losing the forest for the trees in actually assessing them with, multiple assessments and, losing track of, the actual learning, right? The learning opportunities. Excuse me. One thing I sort of worry about in general with sort of education as a whole right now is just this getting so lost in the weeds of sort of providing trackable data for these, that we're losing opportunities to let teachers teach, right? And actually, giving them the freedom to actually create the best inclusive classrooms, right? It's like, so like having a website for, DEIB doesn't really, allow the teachers to make sure that everyone is being, figure out creative ways to include everyone in their teachings, right? And while, that there's a lot, and it's above all of our heads also, right? There's a lot of check boxes we need to check off for, federal grants and for DESE and all this. I want to make sure, I like to think of our district as leaders, and right, and not just the guys checking the box, but try to figure out how we incorporate these things into the classrooms to actually we want to make sure we're not restricting any of our teachers by having all these assessments and all these, different initiatives, whatever, and figuring out ways that we're actually, giving them better opportunities and make sure we're giving them the resources to meet these goals or these, or check off these boxes that sort of need to happen, right? And excuse me, I just get nervous that or I just want to sort of put up that little bit of caution, like let's make sure we're not sort of getting lost and doing all this and making sure we're doing, giving the opportunities to the teachers to actually do what they do best.
It's a great point. The process for us involves the teachers, so CKLA is a good example for you. Last year, in working through CKLA, the coaches, the classroom coaches and the teachers said, wow, there are a lot of assessments in kindergarten and third grade. And as we went through the process, looked for overlap, we pulled assessments, and we'll continue to do that along the way, because as CKLA is a spiraled curriculum, it keeps coming back on itself with just getting more in depth, and it's also overlapping the assessment. Like, okay, I've seen this before. Wait a minute, I've seen this before. So teachers worked with the coaches to pull a lot of the assessments that were either overlapping or excessive. Like there were some units in the third grade that had, do this, oh, here's an assessment, do this, here's another one, do this, here's another one. So we were able to thin that out and really get down to like brass tacks. Like what are kind of the power standards we're looking for here within the curricula. So they'll continue to do that. We really honed it down. We have DIBELS, we use Early Bird, dyslexia screening, and then really we're using iReady, and then STAR will be new for us outside of the state assessments. I'm not counting those as ours. We don't own them. We just get to deliver them. But we're trying to kind of stay within that window. So STAR would be high school, iReady, and DIBELS is middle school, and then DIBELS, Early Bird, Screener, and there's one more small one, and I can't remember the name of it, but that's what we've used now for 2 years. And assessments within the curricula, again, we put a new math curriculum in, we got to depend on our teachers to be able to say, hold on, there's too much, or there's not enough, or we got to adjust it. So that's kind of been the process along the way with the coaches and the curriculum leaders in growing this stuff too, so.
Yeah, no, good, that makes me happy. Like I said, we put all this work into, creating this fantastic workforce of wonderful teachers. We want to make sure that we're supporting them and we're not constricting them.
Right. And I think part of that support is also the work that this group is committing to, okay, we're committing to funding these curricula that are high level, high quality, aligned with our standards. Because before that, as you remember, go back to my entry plan, like every third grade had a different experience at the same point in time. So we've been able to alleviate that in a lot of ways. And, we'll see some upswing, I'm sure, with our assessment each year that goes along. We'll continue to grow that. So fascinating, actually.
Other people? Okay. All right. It looks like we're ready for a motion, Francesca?
Yes, I move, just give me 1 second.
It's okay. Take your time.
And this computer keeps just shutting down.
It's a friendly crowd.
I motion to approve the school district goals for 2023-2024 are as described in the attachment under new business point A and as presented by the superintendent, Mr. Tracy.
Second.
Second by Amy. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All right, all those in favor? And that is unanimous of the 5 members present, and the motion passes. And I guess I would just like to say that, you know, I just feel like these are really important. I feel grateful that we've had an opportunity to see them several times. That was helpful.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to
Thank you.
know. Some people might look at this and say, oh, there's 4 goals. The reality is there are many more behind it, so
Just say I
each
saw
of
about
us.
30.
Yeah.
So there are still other goals. I'll give you some examples. Teachers have to set goals for their evaluation process, so they all carry a goal set. Administrators, same way, they have a goal set. Central office and I worked, central office administrators and I worked last week? Yeah, I think it was last week. We have a set of 3 goals that we're focused on to improve central office. And then personally, me, I'll have a set of goals that I'll bring forward soon. So there are other things going on. I want people to know that this is not all that's happening. There is a lot going on in the school district. We've made incredible strides.
I'm going to throw a wrench into that plan.
No, please.
Impact, not goals.
Yeah.
Right, that's the new focus. Impact, not goals.
Oh, okay.
Telling you,
Um,
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming.
coming.
Okay, I'm ready. All right, are we ready to move on? Okay. The next item is to appoint the school physician. I am going to recuse myself from this item in just an abundance of caution and transparency. I'm going to make you aware that my husband is in medical practice with Dr. Yoon, and so I'm going to turn the gavel over to Amy.
Thank you.
I can give a little bit of an overview.
That'd be great.
Okay, so we are required by law to have a physician available, a medical consultant, really, available to us for various things, including writing prescriptions, and I'm going to use COVID as an example, writing a prescription for being able to administer COVID testing in our buildings. We need state permission, but also a doctor's order to do some of the things we do. This includes some of the medications that we give to kids. There are specific requirements that we file with the state, and in order for that to be managed, it has to be managed by a doctor, not a nurse. All of our nurses this year are RNs. Our lead nurse works hand in hand with Dr. Yoon and Dr. Yoon's office to be able to say, okay, we need to do this, this, and this, or we have an issue related to concussion, can you help us with that? So it could be determining what policy looks like, it could be just general information about medical issues that might be popping up in schools. So for example, MRSA is one that pops up in some schools where MRSA becomes an issue with, say, a sports team or an after-school team, and a lot of times nurses will go to the physician and say, okay, what is best practices, what do we do, how do we approach that? So it's really a consultant opportunity. We're required to have it by law, and Dr. Yoon is, in fact, I talked to his office today, willing to do it again. So this is really a reappointment of Dr. Yoon for this coming school year.
Maybe, should we have a motion to vote on this?
Oh.
Yeah, a motion to appoint Dr. Yoon as school physician consultant.
Second?
Second.
And then any discussion?
Yeah, I had a question. Is this maybe I missed it, is this a paid function?
Yes, $3,500 stipend each year.
Okay,
It's a ton of money.
yeah. It's not going to get rich on that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
So did we have Dr. Yoon as a consultant before? We were kind of renewing the
year.
appointment?
Last year was his
Okay.
first year.
Okay, so this
Yep.
will be the second
This is
year.
the
So every
second year.
year is a position that needs
We
to
have
be?
to appoint it by law every year.
Every year,
Yep.
okay, got you. Thanks for clarifying.
Anyone else? Okay, should we vote?
Looks like he's
Oh.
Canadian.
What's up? Oh, you're just reading. Okay,
Canadian's good.
show of hands to say yes for the motion.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Oh,
I'm
favor.
sorry, I don't do this very often.
Show your
All in
hand.
favor, please. Okay, and all 4 voting members vote yes. And it passes. Sorry, David Polito. Good? Yes? Can I hand back
Yes, you
the
can hand the
gavel?
gavel back.
Do I have to hand the gavel back?
I guess we could fight for it.
Okay, I didn't do a good job.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so next up is, this is really just, at opening day last year, I got the opportunity to speak at opening day at the first day of school to the, I believe it was the whole staff, correct?
It was, yes.
It was. I was nervous.
Great job.
And it was actually really, it was a great opportunity, but unfortunately, I am unavailable on August 28th. So I'm hoping that it's early in the morning, right? It's like at
We started at 8:15.
8:15. So I'm hoping there might be another school committee member who might be willing to give a very brief speech on August 28th.
Unfortunately, it's also my first day.
Yeah, I have a parent orientation at the school too. What time is it again?
8:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
Be done by 9:30.
I am away that week, unfortunately. Sorry.
Anybody want to do it by Zoom? No.
Do it on Zoom.
I actually did by Zoom on there.
Is this a 1-minute speech?
Yeah, it's literally welcoming them back to the school year. Excited to have you back, looking forward to the changes. You could talk about things like the work that we've done along the way to get us to where we are, the portrait of the graduate, the strategic plan, things like that. And then basically what I'll do in mine is connect those dots for them along the way in my speech. So we have a number of very quick, hey, welcome back, including a student. The president of the senior class is the speaker after whoever does the school
Yeah.
committee. The Ed Fund will say a couple words to just say, we're the Ed Fund, here's what we do, mostly for new people, but also to remind people that they're there. And then we go into giving out some awards for people who have met certain milestones, including professional status and other milestones in the district. Then I'll do my opening, really, here's where we've been, here's where we are, and here's where we're going. And then we'll kick it off, and they'll go into the work at their buildings and do their trainings that are over the next 4 days, so.
Well, that's the day before I go to Australia, but I could do it
Well, and
if you don't have any else.
well, and I,
Talk about your trip.
I mean, if the rest of the committee is supportive, I mean, in other words, we do have 2 members that aren't here. So, I mean, maybe that's a good way to leave it, that like, if you are willing to do it,
Yeah.
and that it's, would be, we can ask the committee, like, if people are okay with, if you want to reach out to Jen or Julia and see, I mean, I don't know, I think that that's kind of what
Yeah,
Julia
it's
does,
doable,
right? She
actually.
gives in most
We'll get out of
speeches.
bed in time.
So,
Where will it be, actually?
At the high school,
High school.
in the auditorium.
Okay.
It's a light lift.
it's
yeah.
not, it's,
You
yeah.
could
It's-
actually come in and say a few words and then leave. You don't have to stay.
Okay.
So by,
Yeah, no, I'd
Before
like...
9 o'clock, you'd
Actually, if
be
I do it, I'd like to...
heading to
kind of
Starbucks.
See it as a whole. So,
Great. All right.
2 of my granddaughters just started high school, and we were at their event in Santa Clara doing something similar, actually.
Great. All right. Well, it sounds like you're in.
so you're in?
Okay,
Motion?
excellent.
Thank you.
Add you to the
Alright.
agenda.
I'll get with Eric on what the talking points should be.
Yeah, Eric gave me.
I don't know what to say, no.
I'm sure you've done that
Well,
rodeo.
last year was.
Couple times.
Last year was a very different animal. We were at a very different place, so.
Yes.
It's, yeah, so it'll be.
Yes.
And then actually, I remember it was Eliza, the student, gave just an
Crushed it.
unbelievable speech, and I was like, well, the good news is no one's gonna remember anything I said, because that was so good.
Beauty of it, this student usually steals the day.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. All right.
So we need a
So,
motion? Do we need a motion?
Yeah, I guess why not? Let's have a motion.
So motion to appoint school committee member David Frankel to attend opening day on August 28th.
Second.
Second by Amy. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? All right, and it's unanimous. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next up is a discussion regarding our subcommittees and the way that subcommittees determine their scope of work. So just going to be really open that David Frankel and I had some discussion and some disagreement about the way that sort of methodology for how subcommittees should determine what is on their agenda. My feeling was that the best opportunity for that is to look to the whole committee to get some guidance on how we as a committee want to do that. So I don't want to put you on the spot, David, but I don't also want to dominate. If you want to sort of give an outline to the committee of sort of your thoughts on what you would hope.
Sure.
And can you put the mic closer? I
I'm sorry.
actually can hear you, but I just worry that you're not going to get heard
Yeah.
over this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I conferred with the executive director of MASC and asked what were the governing rules, and he stated that it's the Roberts rules. In the absence of a specific bylaw to the contrary, the Roberts rule says that the subcommittee, certainly the subcommittee serves at the pleasure of the committee, and the committee can make all kinds of referrals to it, but the subcommittee has an autonomous role as well to initiate, to do research, initiate, and suggest policies that the main school committee has not yet referred, and nevertheless, obviously, they can't become policies without the whole committee voting on it. So, and if there's an argument for not being totally dictatorial to the subcommittee on that subject, it really amounts to the problem when there's a more complex potential set of issues associated with possible policies, that to ask the full committee to adjudicate whether it should be even touched by the subcommittee means that you have to go through, and you can't possibly, I don't think, adhere to the protocols. And I'll read you out the protocol that I think is relevant. When making decisions, the school committee members will keep an open mind, utilising the best information available, including research, best practices, public input, financial considerations, and members will debate issues and not each other, etc., etc. So the problem is if you basically necessitate every single thing always going initially through the committee, you're going to tie up a lot of time on things that may never have ever gotten to two votes in the first place. And the subcommittee is not going to start any discussion about policies without at least two votes. And two votes can get that issue raised and debated in the full committee, but I don't think that's a wise thing to do, just because it'll tie up the committee and it may be a total bust anyhow.
I'm sorry, so what was the last thing you said?
It may be a total bust anyhow. So why not, if there is an initiative and a good rationale for doing it in the first place, let them do their work.
Okay. So I hope, thank you for that, and I hope so that so the committee will understand, like, that sort of the difference of opinion is that I don't disagree that there's no law, there's no law that we can do what we want. In other words, as a
Yeah.
full committee, we can do what we want. And in fact, our bylaws are, I think, vague on exactly how it works, and I think that that's probably fine, because there's, in my opinion, there's an infinite number of things that could happen that we might not be able to foresee, so that, I guess what I'd like to put forward, and then I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee, is that, in general, our past practice, I believe, and I'm open to if people don't agree with me, our past practice has generally been that either an item that's on an agenda item for a subcommittee, either is directly tasked by the full committee, so the committee would say, we want you to take this on, or a member of the committee would bring forth to the whole committee and say, I would really like X, Y, and Z topic to be considered by a subcommittee, and ask the committee. Also, sometimes topics are brought forth by the district, right? So so for example, in capital finance, Vinnie might bring a topic to capital finance and say, I'm going to give you some scenarios, on the budget for your feedback. Or a grievance could be filed by the union, and then, would go to the negotiations. So you're right that we wouldn't want every single item on an agenda to have to come through, because it would be, but I guess my concern is simply that I would want most or items to have either come from the district or from this body, rather than from an individual member who wants it on a subcommittee. But again, you're right, there's no,
It would never be
Right.
from an individual member, by the way. At least, while I'm chairing it, it would be a minimum of 2.
so, and how would that occur? Like, how would that, so in other words, so I'm not on the policy subcommittee, so I don't know how that would work, but I know that in our subcommittee, it could, or, in other words, would it be that someone in the meeting says, on the topic for future meeting, I want to have a topic of,
Yeah, in fact,
X.
that's how ADHD got on
and,
there.
and then the other members would support that and say, we want to, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you would have like a vote at an
Yeah.
earlier meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Amy?
I just have some thoughts. So, to my mind, and I've only been doing this a little over a year, but the way I feel like the norm has been for this committee is the purpose of the subcommittees is about efficiency. So, in theory, we could bring everything that subcommittees talk about to this room, to this meeting, but then we would end up having like 6-hour-long meetings. So to my mind, it's sort
Exactly.
of these like break-off teams to handle issues on behalf of the full committee, and then make a decision, come back, have the full committee vote. And there's been times when I think we've asked the subcommittee to go back. We don't agree with what their suggestion or their recommendation is. So in the interest of efficiency, I feel like spending time on, capital finance planning without the full knowledge of the full committee, or on policy without the full knowledge of the committee, isn't efficient. What if you have a 2-hour meeting where you're setting policy, you bring it to the full committee, and it's something that was like not on our radar, and then we just vote no on it, whereas the other way, at least, the full committee is saying, yes, we support discussing this and voting on it. So for me, it's just about efficiency. So that's where I have questions.
This is actually, as you were, because I was sort of processing what David had just said about that it would really be at a top, the policy, let's just say, say policy had a topic for a future meeting. And I was sort of still processing that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like that you're saying that if, let's say, the whole policy committee had a topic that they wanted, that, are you saying it would be that when we did like policy report, policy would say, and, policy would like to make or review a policy or create a policy on, frogs, and bring it, and then have the whole committee say, yes, go forward on that? Is that what you're saying?
So for efficiency's sake, that process makes more sense to me, just because, say if, did you say frogs?
Yeah, I just made it up,
No, that's a
yes.
good example. So,
I was going for something neutral.
so say if if the policy subcommittee decided to talk about frogs and make a suggestion for the full committee, and then you came to the meeting and you had spent hours on it, and then we were like, we don't want to make, a policy on that. That's not efficient. So I think it does make more sense to add something to the agenda during the report, kind of makes sense. Is the full committee interested in policy reviewing and researching XYZ? We vote yes or no, and then in your meeting, and I don't mean to just pick on policy, because I think this
Right,
is
could be
for
true for
all the
anything. Right.
subcommittees. Then the subcommittee would go back and vote and discuss and make their recommendation. Again, I'm just, from a standpoint of efficiency, to me, that's how these subcommittees are supposed to work.
Okay.
Can I chime in on this?
Sure.
I think what Amy said is important, because we just went through our district goals. This is our focus. Here's what we're looking at. And then having the subcommittees, and I'll use negotiations as an example. If someone in negotiations says, you know what, I want to talk about getting the health insurance paid 100% by the district, and just creates that conversation and negotiations, which it's okay. It's
That was it.
No, no.
I was just sweating. I'm
Hypothetical,
already
Vinny.
sweating now.
Hypothetical.
I think frogs was a better example.
Cardiologist will call you later.
It's really when all of a sudden that now hits an agenda, that goes on a discussion for a meeting or 2 or 3 or 4, then comes back to the committee and gets shot down. You just wasted all that time rather than staying focused on the kind of the goals at hand. Like, this is where we set our path for the school year. I think it's important to try and stay on
And on the contrary, right, should the committee as a whole say, okay, we're not getting the quality of applicants we need, to fill these roles. What can we do to make ourselves appear as a better employer, right? Then you could take that as a goal of the district or a goal of the committee, and then go into subcommittee where you can sort of hash it out a little. Hey, Vinny, does it make sense financially to do X, Y, or Z? Because then you're bringing up a topic that is actually in line with the goals, and it's sort of not a personalized topic, that might seem relevant to an individual, and it's easy to get a second vote anywhere here, right? So like, you have to be sort of careful about using a 3-person board as like a litmus test, right? Because again, just because it's you're the majority in the room doesn't mean you're speaking for the majority, and that happens all the time. You're correct in saying that any of us can bring anything up, at any time, excuse me, for review, and that's a really important tool for all of us, as we move forward. But sometimes you have to sort of err on the side of, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of work to be done already. Our volunteer boards, and we pull in very high-priced district employees into our subcommittee meetings. So we should be very cognizant of, even though we're volunteering our time, which is very, expensive, and that we're away from our families and everything else we could be doing at the time, that, there is a cost to everything we're doing and discussing in any room, that eventually does boil down to the bottom line, and making sure that we're staying on track, at all times. Like, even right now, I think this conversation's going on too long, but I just want to go home and eat.
You just got your cue.
But, I always tell him that he can speed it up, but I mean, that's where I'm coming from, especially policy. I was on policy for a few years. There's so much to do at any given time.
Yeah.
I don't know how you find time to do anything else. Like, excuse me, is a reason I actively kind of stay away from it now. As much as I do think it's a super interesting committee to be on. It is very, very, very time consuming. So thank you for taking that on, honestly, taking it off my back, but. But, that's where I'm coming from, being the village elder here, I guess.
Francesca?
Can I make a comment too, since
Please.
everybody says, okay. So I kind of, for the most part, I agree, and I understand the issue, and I kind of was present when that happened, maybe caused it, so.
I didn't hear that last part.
But anyway, so I kind of agree with what's been said, like we want to be efficient. We certainly don't want to spend more time than necessary or maybe reinvent the wheel of things that we know already. We don't want to kind of have subcommittees go into tangents for weeks and then have to come back, and maybe we don't agree that that was even a way to pursue. Totally agree with that. But I also want to say that, if somebody feels that there's an important topic to be brought up to the attention of the others, and I understand nobody wants to waste their time on it, but I think it's very important to voice it, even if it's not necessarily in the goal and the agenda, because in this world things change quickly, something happens, we want to address it. I think it's important to be able to bring it up and openly discuss it. And if that comes up at a subcommittee meeting, I think maybe we should say, okay, because I don't want people to think that they are not allowed to bring up things at a subcommittee meeting or to even discuss it, but because it has to be done only here, or if that is the case, then let's decide that that's the case. I'm not really sure what we're deciding here, but like, in my opinion, I think there should be some level of flexibility if like a spontaneous conversation that happens at a subcommittee leads to a topic that people think is somewhat important, to kind of be able to discuss it and then maybe say, okay, well, before we take actions and spend more time on it, why don't we bring it up and discuss it with a larger group and decide where to go, if it's the case to bring it back to the policy committee or whatever other committee. And so I just don't think we should just say, okay, because it's not on the agenda or because it's not in our main plan, then we should not take this topic into consideration. I think there's merit to that as well.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. I don't think we should ever hinder discussion, but I think keeping a process where maybe if we're in a subcommittee meeting and something comes up and we're like, hey, this is a good conversation, let's bring it to the full meeting and decide, ask the full committee, should we discuss this as negotiation subcommittee or policy subcommittee? Just that kind of like brings both points together, right? So you can talk about, a topic can come up, that's okay, but then to spend time on it, thinking about like time is money, let's spend it on behalf of the full committee, because that's the purpose of the subcommittees, is to support the full committee, to my mind.
I think, Francesca, you articulated my thoughts very well. Like I think you're right that we don't want to say that a subcommittee can never have a topic or something come up that's not on it. I really agree with the way that you framed that, and I think, I think that's a nice flow, right? That a committee can have a conversation and then that it could be a hopefully quick bring to here, like, hey, the subcommittee had this discussion and we think this is something that we'd like to pursue.
Right.
Does the committee want to, yes or no? I don't know how, I don't know how that feels to you, David, or?
Yeah, I think it needs to have that level of flexibility. And
So are we trying to define a process, or what's the outcome of this
you want a
discussion?
policy?
Policy, yeah, work on that.
I think,
We could come up with a policy. On policy.
I guess we certainly could define a process, but it might be, I hope this was just a transparent discussion. I don't know whether other people feel like there needs to be anything done formally. The one point that I felt like people kind of said, but I do think it's really important, is that, and Eric spoke to it, and David spoke to it a little bit too, but like, it's not just our time, it's the superintendent's time.
Right.
And that's really important to me, like how much time we spend, like that's things that he's doing that he's not doing other things for the district. So I do think that there is Like,
His expressed concern really was defocusing, which is a valid concern. And the problem is his focus rightfully is primarily on this year, executing this year. But policy should be something that has the scope of potentially many years. And so
So
they are at odds with each other.
so, and then I do think we need to move on. I don't know that we necessarily need a formalized vote, but I actually would put to you that I think particularly if you and the policy committee are not seeing eye to eye about the level of importance of a particular topic with the superintendent, then I think it would be especially important that you bring that to the committee,
Yeah,
to
no.
have this committee say, that's my opinion. is
If
that-
after a meeting on the topic, together with the superintendent and the subcommittee, they're still in dispute, yeah, absolutely.
Say that again?
If the subcommittee is, together with Eric, is not pretty much unanimous on wanting to bring it to the school committee and there's in dispute, yeah, and if we wanted to pursue that dispute, absolutely bring it to the committee. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
I think that would be, I think that would be really important, and it would be
Yeah.
important for the committee to hear from policy, like, we want to do this, and the
Absolutely.
superintendent doesn't.
I've
and-
no interest in writing roughshod over anything that Eric's doing or thinks, quite frankly.
Well, Eric's pretty tough. I think he could handle a conversation about
I
a
don't know,
disagreement.
we'll see. Yes, I've given up Indian Army.
Yeah,
so-
and it's really, sometimes it's just a suggestion, like I will say to a subcommittee, like, we should probably bring this back to the committee.
Yeah, right.
Because sometimes the transparency piece for me is important when those discussions are happening. So I think in some cases, policy happens to be recorded, negotiations and finance don't get recorded, so people they're not following it, they're not watching it, it's not on TV or anything like that, so they can go by the minutes. But I don't know, I just think it's good business for us to say, we already have a system. We have topics for next agenda. Policy subcommittee was talking about this. What's the committee think? Should we pursue it or not? I just think that if we can do that, it keeps everything transparent, keeps everything in the open, and the committee could say, yeah, absolutely, and, check for policies, check with MASC, check with other places too.
Right, and we've seen that process. We did that negotiations did that regarding the regional agreement. We brought that, it's been brought a few times, like, shall we move forward or not?
But it is transparent. I mean, we've been posting an agenda and attachments and
The
that's for
conversation,
everyone to see.
though, isn't transparent. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But like, we have conversations here and
Yeah.
it's recorded and folks can come in live, but some of the subcommittee meetings aren't. I think, I don't want
Really?
to speak for you, Eric. I think you meant more like
was, isn't it?
transparent to the public. And then the minutes are not usually as robust as our full committee meeting minutes, yeah.
Okay, I do want to be mindful, we have some really
Yeah.
important
Okay,
stuff
we can
to
fix
go
that.
on. So do we
Give you verbatim.
Do we feel like we got a little bit more clarity? Do you feel like you,
That's fine. Yeah. I don't need
Okay.
any more clarity.
I felt like that was a helpful conversation, I really did.
Yeah, it was
Thank you
helpful.
for everyone for participating. All right, all right.
I don't get why Vinny's so nervous. He does this all
Oh, no,
the time.
okay, so, we're gonna need Francesca. So these are just annual things that we need to do to appoint our treasurer and assistant treasurer. And these are really, even though it says appoint, these are actually both reappointments, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Francesca, would you be willing to make a motion?
Sorry, it was just.
I actually think we could take them as one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was distracted for a second. Yeah, so the reappointment, so yes. So point A and B essentially, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I motion to reappoint the treasurer Kevin Mertz and the assistant treasurer Katie Lavoy.
Second.
Second by Amy. Does anyone have any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? And the motion passes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And now, Vinny, you're up.
Should go to it in a second. There it is. It's good. Yeah.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah. Gabriella told me to, so.
So cute, so cute.
Great ages.
Okay, so tonight I'm here to present to you our FY23 year-end expenditures summary. Just a quick note here. While I was developing this presentation, attached to the agenda tonight, there's 3 exhibits. One of them is the normal exhibit, which is our account detail, which lists out our roughly 600 active accounts, what the budget is, what the year-to-date expenses were, and what the balance is. After that, I normally post one presentation, which I made, developed, and after I was done, I kind of walked through it, and it took me nearly 45 minutes to go through it, and it's upwards of 30 slides. It's broken out. I break out every school in location by DESI categories. So for all 7 locations, I broke it out into each of the 12 DESI categories. And after I was done, I said to myself, this is long and boring, and I really tried to develop a summary one instead. Even when I was done with this, I still realized it was boring, so my apologies. I will try to move through it quickly. The detailed presentation really is that. There's items on there that I discussed that are $34. I mean, we have a $44 million budget, and I literally broke it out per dollar. On the summary presentation here, I left a few of those items off that were really small. Some of them are still on there. As I go through it tonight, I might not talk about every single bullet point, but of course, if there's any questions on the summary presentation or on the detailed presentation, please don't hesitate to ask. You can ask in the middle of the presentation. You don't have to wait to the end. I really don't mind. I actually prefer it. It gives me a second to break up and catch my thoughts, so don't feel like you have to wait till the end to ask me anything. So just from a high-level point of view, FY23 really was another crazy year. We've had extremely high levels of turnover, vacant positions, transfers, changes to people's assignments, changes to their FTEs and schedules. And the reason for all these changes is because of those vacant positions and turnovers. There really were a lot of gaps in instruction to students, so we really tried to fill those gaps throughout the year and move people around and put them where we thought they were needed. But because of that, a lot of payroll was left unused at the end of the day. You guys have heard me say during our quarterly updates that we have lists of vacant positions throughout the year. So because of all these changes, it resulted in nearly $1.4 million of payroll funds left over at the end of the year, which is really an extremely high number for us historically. On top of the payroll, a few non-payroll related items that are pretty big to talk about, of course, is our out-of-district tuitions. This is always a moving target and is always a big number in our budget. So from a high-level point of view, our out-of-district tuitions at the end of the year came in $300,000 less than what we budgeted or what we anticipated to spend. On top of that, we received an extra $272,000 in circuit breaker offsets, which directly go towards our out-of-district tuitions. In addition, we also received $102,000 in school choice offsets that I'll talk a little bit about more later in the presentation, and roughly $108,000 in other grants we received during the year that we did not anticipate.
Those are additional on top of what was budgeted?
Correct, yes. So we don't know the exact amount of the grants when we submit them. Those allocations usually don't come out till later on, so some of them came in higher than we anticipated, and we received new grants that we didn't anticipate receiving back when we built the budget. So to offset some of these things, as you saw during our quarterly updates, we requested transfers throughout the year to help put this money to use, and we put it towards a lot of capital improvements and technology throughout the year. So this chart is the same chart you're used to. It's our summary by DESI category. At the end of the day, we have a current year-end FY23 expenditure balance of approximately $2.48 million. This is broken out into $1.4 million in payroll and $1.1 million in non-payroll. Again, this is that same chart, but in DAC form, otherwise known as our school or site or support program. So just to dive into the DESI categories right now, I'm just going to briefly run through them. For our administration DESI category, we have a residual balance of roughly $147,000. Between Eric and myself, we budget for contingency funds during the year. These is mainly used for two things. It's one, to cover unanticipated deficits throughout the year in case there's overexpended lines at a school or in a major program area. We kind of have those contingency funds to help them out. The second reason we have contingency funds in our department is to really foster kind of innovation amongst our teachers. So when you look at our budget timeline, we built this budget 20 months before the year ended. So it's nearly impossible to predict what somebody's going to need 20 months down the road. So we have those funds in case a teacher or a staff member come to us and say, we really have this project that we want to get off the ground, and we really think it's going to engage the students and help foster their learning experience. We would kind of call upon those funds that we have in our contingency to help them get that, to kickstart their project. So between both our offices and the school committee's contingency funds, there was approximately about $100,000 unspent at the end of the year. As you can see, we didn't need it this year as we had other funds available. On top of that, our special ed legal fees came in roughly $50,000 under what we budgeted and what we anticipated. We also had a few vacancies within the administrative DAC, which accounted for about $10,000 in leftover balance at the end of the year. On the opposite side, we did reclassify some of our software and some of our technology, along with purchasing new programs like Panorama and Vector. We also moved BudgetSense to the cloud instead of housing it on our server, and we updated our website. Those items came in at roughly $50,000 over what we anticipated. For our instructional leadership DESI category, we ended the year at roughly $169,000. $60,000 of this relates to the 0.6 FTE out-of-district chair position that was vacant the entire year. Because of its vacancy and because we had a difficult time hiring, that was actually removed from our '24 budget, but nonetheless, that money still remains at the end of FY23. Again, and throughout this presentation, you'll see that we have staff turnover everywhere. For the instructional leadership category, that amounted to roughly $34,000. We also had $33,000 in unspent stipends. This relates to activity clubs, new teacher, yep.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about staff turnover?
Yes.
My understanding about what was different or was is it not so much that people, it's more that when someone left, there was a gap before you could hire? Was that typically, like, more so than usual?
That would
was-
be what I refer to as vacancies here. So the line at the bottom, 5,000, that's the gap.
Yeah,
The
okay.
turnover would be something like, we budgeted a teacher
And then
at
you
an
hired someone at a-
Exactly.
at a later-
We
okay.
budgeted them at a
Thank you.
master's 12, and we hired a master's step 2-er. That gap in salary is what I refer to as the turnover.
Okay, thank you.
And then again, the vacancies is when nobody's there. Because you mentioned it, there are a few points, I believe, in the detailed presentation around TAs. TAs are a constant turnover and vacancies. So at the elementary level especially, I kind of added those together at the 3 elementary schools because it was a revolving door. It really wasn't worth the time to break out how much of this was a turnover, how much of this was a vacancy, or how much of this was like a salary scale advancement that didn't happen. There was just so much movement with the TAs. I did summarize and add those together just in the elementary school at the TA level. Nowhere else did I do that. I was just pointing it out in case somebody noticed it. In regards to unspent stipends, we budget a specific amount of stipends for new teacher mentors because we don't know how many new teachers we're actually going to take in. We didn't take in as much as we budgeted, so there was a residual balance within our stipends category. We did receive an additional $10,000 in our Title I grant that affected this DESI category as well. On top of that, we had $7,700 left over in our principals and directors affiliations and PD lines and their memberships that they did not spend at the end of the year. In terms of our teachers DESI category, we entered FY23 with approximately $340,000. The couple big ticket items are around our school choice in offset. So I know you've heard me mention this before, but when we budget for school choice in, we receive roughly $5,000 per student that comes in. But if that student is a special ed student or has an IEP and receives additional services, we receive additional income for those services. We don't budget for that special ed increment. So a lot of this $101,000 relates to that special ed increment. And the reason we don't do that is because it constantly changes.
No, we can hear you.
The students change every year, and the services they receive every year also change. So we don't consistently budget for that special ed increment within school choice in.
It did die. It did die.
Maybe I did hit it, sorry. It's because I talk with my hands too much. In addition to that, within our teachers DESI category, we had a lot of unpaid leaves, whether these were just requested leaves, medical leaves, or maternity leaves. We had a lot of gaps where there was not a person on staff or they were not receiving any sick day pay. That accumulated to another $100,000. In addition, we had another $96,000 in staff turnover, as I mentioned before, hiring new staff at a lower rate. In addition, I'd like to thank Kirsten Losey for picking up a lot of the fine arts curriculum leader work while she was acting as our interim middle school assistant principal. That move alone saved us $67,000 at the end of the year. We saved another $63,000 because we did not run our 3rd pre-K classroom. But to offset that, you will see at the bottom that we took in less pre-K revenue. So those two kind of net out together. In addition, for the entire fiscal year, we did not have one of our 0.7 FTE SLP teaching positions, which again saved us approximately $58,000 throughout the fiscal year, as well as another about $90,000 combined between our ELL vacant position and our world language teacher reduction. To offset some of these items during the year, we did request a transfer that accumulated up to $55,000 that we transferred out to our capital and fixed assets DESI category. On top of that, as you heard me say before, and as you'll see on the next slide, during the year, both Cutler and Winthrop traded in 3 TAs each for a teacher. So ultimately, for the teacher's DESI category, that cost us money in this category. You're going to see the opposite happen in the other teaching services in a moment. But that move alone for the teacher's category put us in a deficit of $116,000. Again, it's the same thing, but on the other side, we saved $160,000, so you can see this move did save us money, but it affects the DESI categories in different ways. In the teachers, it makes it negative. In the other teaching services, it makes it positive. On top of that, again, we had about another $95,000 in staff turnover, and we received a pretty good increase in our IDEA grant, as well as a residual balance left over from our fiscal '22 IDEA grant that we put towards TA staff that helped us save money in this category. We did budget approximately $15,000 for tutoring services for a few special ed students. Some of those students ended up going out of district, so that increased our out of district line, but saved us their tutoring money on the other teaching services line. In addition to that, we saved a little bit of money by hiring a Merrimack Fellow instead of a full-time TA. This saved us another $6,000. To offset this, we did, as it relates to the teacher's DESI category, because we had a lot of FMLAs and a lot of maternity leaves, we had to bring in more substitutes. So this drained our substitute account, and we ended in a deficit of around $20,000 as it relates to just our general substitute line. We also transferred out another $26,000 throughout the year, and as I mentioned on the previous slide, because we had the SLP vacancy, we actually contracted out those services, so that hit the other teaching services category, which put us in a deficit of around $83,000. In terms of professional development, I've noticed that professional development has really slowed down since COVID hit. I don't know if it still relates to it, but ever since then, a lot of teachers aren't going out and receiving PD outside of the district anymore. This is a trend that we'll probably look deeper into when we develop our '25 budget, but as it relates to this DESI category, we ended with approximately $141,000 at the end of the year, and a lot of it is attributed to just that discretionary professional development that we did not end up spending. In addition, we were able to receive additional grant funds, which dispersed about $10,000 to the grant. We also have a second substitute line, which is specifically reserved for hiring substitutes while teachers or TAs go out to receive PD, but since they're not going out, we didn't need that substitute, and we ended up having roughly $35,000 left over in substitute. All right, it's back on. Okay, it's probably good with that one. For instructional materials, equipment, and technology, we ended the year with approximately $65,000. We did end up overspending this line item during the year, but we did have $130,000 of transfers that we requested during the year. That transfers were necessary to pay for additional Red Cats that you heard me talk about, which is the audio devices, as well as new laptops for teachers, and additional hardware and devices that include more Chromebooks, more iPads, and more devices that they use in the library and that we use during our MCAS testing. In addition to that, we did end the year with $105,000 of unused discretionary supplies and materials that was spread out across all 5 schools. In terms of our guidance counseling testing, we ended the year with approximately $60,000. The main attributor to this is just staff turnover and unpaid leaves because, again, maternity leaves and medical leaves. For our pupil services, we ended the year with approximately $252,000. During the first quarter of the year, I asked for a transfer of $193,000. This related to the transportation bid that we went out to. If you remember, I didn't want to state in our budget how much we set aside for the increase that year, so we actually budgeted that in a different DESI category. Then after the bid came through and the numbers were final, we transferred that money over. In addition to that, because because lunch is universally free for everyone, we did not need to bail out the cafeteria as we have historically done in the past. Because of that, we did not use roughly $44,000. On top of that, for our lunch monitors, there was not one day last year where we were fully staffed with our lunch monitors. There were constant vacancies across all 3 elementary schools, which resulted in about a $40,000 savings. In addition to that, as it relates to athletics, the district collected $27,000 more in user fees than we originally anticipated. On top of that, we underspent our expenditures for athletics at approximately $23,000. So combined athletics ended the year with about $50,000 of unused expenditures. To offset some of this, the other student activities expenses did end in a deficit during the year of roughly $9,000. And as it relates to transportation, again, our out-of-district special ed transportation ended the year in a deficit of $102,000. For operations and maintenance, we ended the year with approximately $160,000. We did ask for a transfer during, I believe, quarter 3 of roughly $67,000. On top of that, we had a maintenance technician vacancy pretty much the entire fiscal year, I think except for 1 month of the year. That resulted in savings of $48,000. We had a lot of office personnel. I'm sorry, we did not have as much office personnel in overtime as we originally anticipated, saving us roughly $20,000. We also ended the year with approximately $10,000 of our extraordinary maintenance account unspent. To offset some of that, we were over just a little bit on our utilities and our clothing reimbursement that was a requirement in the new collective bargaining agreement. On top of that, we have seen an increase in our contracted maintenance services and supplies that ended in a deficit of about $38,000. For benefits and fixed charges, this is where we place that transportation money. That's why these numbers are so big here. You can see the bottom line is a transfer of almost $700,000. $200,000 of that right off the bat is the transportation that we placed here instead of the transportation line, so we didn't reveal our cards during the bid negotiations. On top of that, we did have roughly $200,000 of health insurance premiums left over at the end of the year. Again, that's where that $200,000 was placed. Sorry, I thought you had a question. On top of that, we had about $415,000 as it relates to our payroll taxes and unemployment. For whatever reason, and it's a good thing, we did not have high unemployment this year. Whether a lot of the people got jobs instantly or whether they just did not collect, it went unspent. On top of that, we paid our Essex retirement appropriation in the first week of July. Because we did that, they give you a little bit of a discount, and we saved an additional $19,000. Again, to offset this, we transferred out roughly $653,000. Again, $200 was transportation, and a lot of the rest was for capital improvements that I spoke about a minute ago, and that is the next slide right here. So for capital and fixed asset improvements, we ended the year at a deficit of $92. This was because not entirely, but the weight room came in a little bit higher than what we originally anticipated, and finally, at the end, it cost us roughly $142,000 that hit our general fund. On top of that, we asked for a transfer to purchase desks for Bucher and the first phase of our smart board replacement project across the district. For programs with other school district, otherwise referred to as our out-of-district tuitions and our school choice out, as I mentioned before, we had a change in our enrollment or our projected enrollment of roughly $305,000 under budget. On top of that, again, we received an additional $272,000 in circuit breaker, and we sent out $20,000 less in school choice kids to other school districts.
I'm just trying to make the
Don't worry.
lights turn back on.
On top of that, we prepaid an additional $11,000 in out-of-district tuitions and had a Q2 transfer of $130,000. Last but not least is our debt, where we ended the year in a deficit of $7,005. This relates to the feds raising interest rates every single quarter last year, which I don't think anyone could have anticipated. I did not when we originally built the budget 20 months ago. So that increase in interest rates caused us to pay roughly $7,000 in additional costs as it relates to our short-term borrowing for the Winthrop and Bucher boiler project that I believe happened in 2019, as well as the FY21 capital projects that were approved at town meeting that were for various projects across the district. So again, just to bring it all back together, it all adds up to a residual balance of $2.4 million, broken out as 1.4 for payroll and 1.1 in non-payroll. So tonight, I am asking for 2 transfers to bail out the 2 deficit DESI categories. The first one being $100 transferred from administration to capital and fixed assets improvements. And the last, as I just mentioned, $7,005 for coming from administration and going to our debt. So this is the transfer motion, and then that ends the presentation. I have one comment to make after, but I'll stop and take any questions and leave the motion up.
Questions?
This is a related question. Do you have a back of the envelope figure for what the,
I know I'm hot. I shouldn't have worn the jacket.
feel free to take it off.
It's hot in here.
Back of the envelope for, let's say there's $100 to $120 million worth of capital expenditures that we're looking forward at spending. What would be roughly the annual bond? I know this is a ballpark guess, bond impact, because we're sort of paced by the towns at about 2.5% a year, without sort of breaking their view of what's acceptable growth. I'm just trying to get a.
The 2.5% would be for our operating. For something like the Cutler Elementary project, that would be a debt exclusion, which doesn't get calculated into the 2.5%. It's outside of that.
But it's material.
Oh, definitely.
Relative size is material to their budget.
Yep.
And that's what I assume will affect their willingness to go along with it.
Yep. So a lot of it obviously has to do with how much MSBA gives us. But if I had to take a ballpark, and it depends on, the length of the loan we take out at the time. But if I had to put an estimate, I would probably guess it would cost us around $4 million a year for 20 years is what I would guess.
So that's a roughly 10% increment from their point of view.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And that obviously will change depending on when we take it out and what the interest rates are.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
I understand. It's very fuzzy at the moment.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions? All right, looks like we're ready for a motion.
Motion, yes. I motion that we approve the FY23 operating and debt expense budget transfers as recommended here by the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration and as presented on the previous slide entitled Year-End Transfer Request.
Second.
Second by Amy. Is there discussion? Okay, all those in favor? And that is unanimous of the members present.
Thank you, guys. So just the,
Passes.
yep, sorry.
Thank you.
Just the last comment, I know you're probably thinking, so what happens with all this money? Just briefly, it all falls to E&D at the end of this year. And just like the past 2 years, it has to be taken off our next year's budget, which will be FY25. So the idea from here is to work out within the Capital Finance Committee on a recommendation on what to do with this and how it's going to affect our 25 budget. If you remember during one of my presentations earlier, I did recommend that we match that $750,000 that we've been taking off our operating budget for the past, I believe, 3 cycles, as it ties back to the Chapter 70 increase with COVID 3 years ago. So as of right now, that would be the only recommendation I have, and the rest of it will kind of be hashed out through our Capital Finance Committee in conjunction with building our 25 budget. So I will probably give a presentation around our E&D and what the ultimate number is in the October timeframe after I submit it to the DOR. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Okay. All right. Next, we have our committee and liaison reports. Capital Finance has not met as far as I know. Drew?
Sounds right.
We did meet. I just
did.
wasn't there, so I can't
Oh.
update it entirely. But we did meet.
Yeah, I can speak briefly about it. I was at the meeting. Imagine that.
You were at the meeting.
Unusual.
The committee actually had a guest speaker, a former parent, come in and talk about athletic fees and impact of athletic fees in relation to kids who are in co-ops. He did a presentation, submitted a written letter to the committee. The committee requested some information from our attorney. We're just waiting for that back to the committee for our next meeting to finish the discussion. The second thing they did was set the rates for athletics, the tiers. As you know, we had been able to reduce the tiers this year, again, based on what you've seen here and based on the cut that we made, the shift that we made in the budget for FY24. So the tiers, again, will go down again a little bit, not a ton of money, I think $50 to $100, depending on which tier it is. So that's good news. That was really the crux of the committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. Policy.
Policy hasn't met. There was a couple of postponements. It's a meeting next week,
Okay,
and the agenda is posted.
okay, great. Yep. What?
Not next week, the week after, 20.
Oh, sorry. I take it
No,
back.
we meet the 22nd.
It's a
Sorry, it is next week. My
yeah,
apologies.
I think that,
time flies when you have.
My
fun.
apologies. I was thinking I had one more week of the summer left to get stuff done.
Nope. Nope. It's over.
Thanks.
Oh, that's sad.
Looking forward to Thanksgiving.
Stop it.
Thanksgiving.
So true.
We have one more week, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so busy though.
nego-
Might as well be here.
Negotiations has met, and we will update you during executive session.
Yes. Lots of good news.
Okay. Wenham Master Planning, do you have anything, David?
Yeah, I've attended a couple more meetings of that. They're getting ready to publish. It's quite a process, and they're doing more final outreach. I think I've pushed to get us more visible in the plan than we otherwise I think would be. But also encouraging them to make one of their strategies to really be active in bringing the town governments together with the school district to jointly model out the scenarios, because they've spent quite a bit of money building a model to model out if we add this kind of housing or this kind of commercial property, to see what the net income improvement is to the plant, to the town. But all of that needs to be brought together in order to kind of keep on checking what can we feasibly do, and what can the town do to be more accommodating, rather than just having a fight, which I think Eric definitely avoided this year with a lot of outreach. But I think from kind of since they're trying to put a strategic plan together, I know Hamilton is too. The question is how to bring that all together in a way that gives you visibility of the what-ifs. So, and there's, I
Great.
think, some receptiveness to that, so we'll see.
Great, thank you. Hamilton Master Planning, the most recent meeting, which was I think last week, was actually a very productive meeting. It felt really good, where I think we're moving forward. We are, it sounds like maybe Wenham is maybe ahead, we're not, but we are finalizing goals, and then there is going to be another public input session in the fall around sort of implementation to get public input. But yeah, it felt like we're moving in the right direction, so.
Yeah, there is another phase that they're just timing up, will be done while I'm away, where they're deliberately going to bring in a lot more, some shared or facilitated by, subject by subject by some of the master plan committee, but then they're going to bring in a whole additional level of local community members to kind of provide more feedback, and so they're not, don't want to just publish it, they want to really exercise it against a whole range of opinions, having done a lot of work to collect them in the first place with the meeting in the box stuff that they did.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so far it seems like a reasonable process,
Yeah,
hopefully.
I remember you brought us that meeting in a box. It sounded like a great way to model getting public input. So, great. All right. Anybody have any questions on any of that? All right, Eric, it's up to you.
Just open my notes here, okay. So certainly, my sleepless nights have already begun. The school is closer and closer to opening. To wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, did I get that? Did I do that? Did I get this ready? Did I send that email? So that will start for our teachers soon if it hasn't already. I live with a teacher and she does the same thing, jumps up and says, oh, I gotta fix my plan. So it's an interesting time of year for teachers, administrators going back to school, but also for our kids. We're excited to have the kids come back and to interact with our families again, bring them back into our buildings. The buildings are, as you can see by this room, the floors are being waxed and finished up this week, and then some of the smaller things that they started doing also this past week, like changing filters in all the air handling units on the roofs, the ones in the classrooms, changing filters in like water, where kids fill their water bottles, so all the kind of small beginning of the year things, oiling motors and just getting things ready. We do have still 21 open positions with school 2 weeks away. 9 of those are teaching assistants. We're having a really hard time hiring teaching assistants, and we're not alone. Everybody's trying to find a way to coax people to come in and be teachers' assistants. We also have a half of an ELL teacher, special education teacher open at the elementary level, a full-time maintenance person during the day, nighttime custodian for this building, a speech and language pathologist, and again, some of the other positions like recess monitors, lunch monitors, crossing guards. We still have a number of those. Cafeteria workers, thank you, for a number of those positions open. And those are good positions if somebody's looking for something to do for a couple of hours a day, either working as a crossing guard or just keep an eye on kids in the cafeterias, and mostly at our elementary schools. So we'll keep putting information out. We're looking for other ways to advertise outside of our current advertisements, including I just got a quote for a billboard on 95. So we're trying to really just put it out there as far as we can. We just really need to figure out different ways to get the word out. What we're finding is teachers, which we've filled just about every teaching position because they're on SchoolSpring, and we primarily advertise on SchoolSpring, which goes into Indeed, but there are not a lot of people, if you said to a teacher's assistant that you hire, where did you find out about the job? It wasn't on Indeed, and it wasn't probably in SchoolSpring. They heard about it from a friend, or they live in the community and heard it. So we're just trying to get the word out. We'll keep putting it out. It'll go out weekly. It goes out in the principals' newsletters, and we're gonna ask the towns. We gave a flyer to each of the towns to put out, and then we've actually added ads on LinkedIn and Twitter, which is now X, and Instagram. So we're just going to keep pouring, trying to hit all the available avenues. But if you want to work for the best school system in this district, call me. We have a lot of positions open. New teacher orientation, this is exciting. We start that next week, next Monday and Tuesday. We're going to bring in 15 new teachers and work with them over a 2-day period, and that's really orienting them to the district, the way things happen, helping them understand the strategic plan, helping them understand our goals and mission, and then building in things like technology, getting their computers and getting their classroom technology set up, and how they get into the different systems, how they log in, how they get into their email. The mentor program will connect with them, the Ed Fund will connect with them. So it's a packed 2 days for them as new people to the district, and we're excited to meet them and work with them for a couple of days. You're all welcome to come at any time during the day, Monday and Tuesday, or at the high school in the library. At the same time, we also have our Skillful Teacher course running, where our second-year teachers are required to take the Skillful Teacher course, which is really all about teaching in a nutshell. It's really the most renowned course in teaching about teaching, and we require our second-year teachers to take this course so that we all have the same vocabulary and understanding of what's going on in the classroom, but also use the same vocabulary within our evaluation systems. Online HR functions will start this year. Last year, we transitioned our Budget Sense software from being self-hosted on a server here to the cloud, which enabled us to now add additional functions so that if you want a day off and you're an employee, you can log in and choose a day off, and it'll be shot directly to your supervisor. Central office has been testing this for this past week, and it seems to work flawlessly. So it also updates all of the records, so we're saving a lot of time from our HR director having to take the lists of who was out that week and go back into Budget Sense and put it in. It'll all get done now electronically, and this will also allow us to go the next step to put all of our onboarding information online, so that when we hire you, we just send you an email. You have everything in your email. As the forms are done, they get automatically shipped back to HR. So coordinating that has been fun this summer. We're still looking at some of the functions, like how we do certain things, but it's working out, and it will certainly save us thousands and reams of paper, because we, believe it or not, still used triplicate forms up until this past year. And then we're excited to run the first four days of schools. It's different this year. The teachers will be involved in a whole set of workshops over the first 4 days. We also will still have our 6th grade orientation, our kindergarten orientation, our 6th grade orientation, our 9th grade orientation during those 4 days. So it's exciting. They get a little taste of having some kids in the building. They get into their classrooms. There's time for specific speakers. There's a speaker coming in Thursday morning. You're certainly all welcome to come if you're available at 8:15 on Thursday morning at the high school. She's, happiness, I guess. She'll talk about happiness and enjoying yourself and your job and things like that. So we're excited about that. And then the big change this year was also we've finally been able to institute a night parent conference with teachers at the elementary level. We have not had one in many years. So we worked the schedule out and moved some things around, and that was part of the schedule that we approved earlier in the year. So this will allow us to do still some afternoons to meet with parents, teachers meeting with parents at the elementary level, but now we have an evening opportunity for teachers to meet with parents who work during the day and can't free themselves up to go to a daytime meeting with a teacher about their child. We've integrated this with the report card coming at the end of the sequence, so they don't have to put report card comments in, because they'll be able to meet with the teacher directly and know exactly where their child stands. So we're going to try it out this year, and we're going to work with the union and our teachers and the parents and see how it works out and make tweaks as we go. But we're excited to try that, and as part of our equity movement, like really opening the doors to more people to be able to have a conference with our teachers. And that is all.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
No?
Okay, that was a lot. Yes, that was
was a
great.
lot.
It's great that it's all in the cloud now. That was a really
Yeah.
great move.
We went through a lot for that, you and I.
Excellent. So on my chair's report, I'm actually going to ask Francesca, our secretary, to give a brief report. My hope is that eventually, or next time, we can add that just as a normal part of the committee. And I asked Francesca if she would just really just report out on our subcommittee minutes and where we stand and what's outstanding. Because I think we need to be
Right.
aware.
So I
Let's
did-
hear it, Francesca.
Yeah, I did the homework. I didn't prepare a presentation, but I'm just gonna go through it verbally if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just went on our website, the school district website, and checked what's been posted there. There's a very nice records of all the meetings and minutes for like years up back to like 2017, I think, 18. Anyways, so I checked for each of the subcommittees, and I'm gonna start with the negotiation subcommittee. So I found that the minutes are somewhat available until May 16, 2022. So up until that date, there's been a, meeting, minutes have been recorded and posted for the most part. Just of note, some meetings in 2022 appear as approved and withheld, which means probably we have the minute somewhere, but they're not kind of clickable on the website. And in 2020, 2021, some minutes are available, but several are missing in that particular kind of school year. So that's for the negotiation subcommittee. Oh, and after May 16, 2022, there's really no minutes available that we can click on and see publicly. So regarding the capital planning, I did the same exercise of going through every meeting, and again, minutes are pretty much all available until January 25, 2021. There are just 4 missing, but back in 2017 or 19. And then after January 25, 2021, there's no posted minutes on the website. And lastly, the policy and legislative subcommittee. Again, there's minutes mostly available. Actually, they did a really good job, I think, there until September 19, 2022. And then after that, they're not posted on the website. And there's just 2 missing back in 2019. But other than that, they're all there. So after September 19, so about a year ago, there's no minutes posted, but I know that we have them,
Yeah, we
and
have
we have approved them, and we're approving them.
This
Right.
next meeting.
Right.
But who
Yeah,
actually
those will
does
get
the-
approved Tuesday, I think, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who actually does the physical posting?
Janelle.
Okay.
So I would.
Thank you, Francesca. That's
Yeah.
helpful. Does anybody from, it sounds like policy, it sounds like you have some, you're aware, and it sounds like you have some minutes that you'll,
Yeah, they're posted with with the meeting notice.
they've been approved, is that what you're
No,
saying?
they're on the next agenda for approval.
They're on
Right,
the
yes.
agenda for
Okay.
approval.
I think that, yes, since we started with a new sort of group, we've had 2 meetings, and there's minutes of that we need to approve at our next meeting next week,
Yeah,
so.
there's a missing, one missing.
From Anna
prior
Cizik,
to
right?
us, which was Anna Cizik, has been chased for them, and for some reason, we haven't been able to find them.
All right. Does, I think, Francesca, you're the only person from capital planning here, right? Capital finance? Is
Right.
it- Yes?
Because
Is that
Jen
right?
and- yes.
So I don't know if you have any information on the minutes from there.
So we really.
It's okay if you don't, I'm just.
Yeah, I actually know, but I noticed that actually, we've had only just 1 meeting since I joined that group, so, and I think, we haven't approved the minutes for that one yet, but,
Okay.
that's all I know,
And, okay,
yeah.
yeah. And I know, negotiations, I know we have some
Yes.
information.
Some pending and, coming up,
Yeah, yes, I think we've not approved them, but we do have
There's a lot to
I think we
approve.
have a lot of pending ones that we have drafts minutes of, I hope.
we do.
Excellent.
One of those were executive session, too.
And I just wanted to speak to what Francesca discovered in negotiations, is that those that you discovered, the ones that say approved and held, those are because they're executive session minutes, and so the approved and held does mean that it's a positive sign. They are there, they exist. Janelle has a very solid way of holding those minutes. And if, in other words, if there were a need to see those, we could do that. We would be able to. So they may or may not be posted
Publicly.
publicly.
That makes
but,
sense.
but
That makes
they-
sense.
But that does mean
Yeah.
they exist and they've been approved, which is good.
Yeah,
So,
good. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? No. I don't know that I have much else on my chair's report, except to say that I was really, really felt like that was a really productive retreat that we had. I am grateful that the time that everyone spent. I felt it was, got me really excited to get started for a new and really productive year. There's really some big things ahead. So I'm looking forward to it. All right. Anybody have any questions for me? No? All right, topics for future meetings?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. All right, anybody have anything else?
No.
No. Okay, at this point, I move to adjourn into executive session for purpose number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the teaching assistant union, where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I'll do it.
Second.
Second by Amy, and we need to do a roll call vote to adjourn. David?
Yes.
Ina's a yes. Amy?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
All right, and it is unanimous, and we are moving into it.